In this video, we're going to be talking Operation Floodgate and the route you are going to be using. Now, there are a few things I do want to note. First off, this is pretty much a Pug Week 1 route. The routes can adapt over time, depending on your composition, or just generalized strategies, or future nerfs or buffs to certain mobs or bosses. So take that with a grain of salt. Also, Keystone Guru, at the time of recording this video, is slightly out of date. They have removed this weapon stockpile up here. So you're forced to pull this Blood Warper to remove this stockpiled weapon explosion. So that has made this route a little bit more linear than I'd like to admit. But anyways, let's get into it. So starting off the dungeon, there are a few things you can do. I do recommend starting with a big pull, though. This is to make use of cooldowns, DPS cooldowns specifically. So there is this patrolling mecha drone sniper pack, and then there are these 2 packs of loader bots. Now, loader bots are a little annoying for melee, but generally speaking, you can lock them down. They do this thing called wind up or something along those lines. And basically, they spin around doing a blade storm. You can stun this, but keep in mind they are mechanical. So things like blinding light or blind or sigil of misery, fears, those things do not work against these things. So melee, do be a little careful and then make sure you're just kicking the snipers on their trick shot cast. Next, you are going to want to pull this Shredinator 3000. I don't recommend pulling these Surveyors. They add some kick and complexity to the pull. Another option is you can actually do just one giant pull with Lust if everyone knows how they work. But the Shredinators are pretty scary, especially for people who are going to be seeing them for the first time, so I don't advise doing that. The contractors that are with them don't really do much. They're essentially just fodder. Basically, the Shredinators, they do this thing called Shredder Blade. It's a wind-up cast, and once it goes off, it will target all 5 players with giant saw blades that'll erupt from the ground. You want to move out of these. They do very high-ticking physical damage. Use a defensive if you're going to stand in it, but basically it's that, and then there's a frontal on the flamethrower cast that it does, which always targets a tank. Next, and once you destroy this weapon stockpile, you're going to want to head down to this next pack down here. There is 1 Surveyor and 2 Contractors. Again, Contractors don't really do much. Surveyor has 1 kick you want to do on Surveying Beam, and then the Architect just spams Nail Gun at random party members. He's also going to be on top of Scaffolding, and when he's on the Scaffolding, he takes reduced damage. So break the Scaffolding, and then focus down the Architect while kicking the Surveyor. And then once this pull dies, you're going to want to make sure you destroy this weapon stockpiled explosion. The next pull I recommend doing is these 3 loader bots into this Surveyor and Contractors who are next to this water pool. Nice 6-target cleave like in that first pull, though. Loader bots do that blade storm. Just make sure you're CCing them. After this, you'll head up the stairs and you'll handle this Demolitionist with the 3 snipers. Snipers have a spell called Trick Shot, as well as just their shoots or snipes. Make sure you're using a defensive if you're being targeted by a lot of them, and kick the cast. Now, the one thing the Demolitionists do is they cast a thing called their RPG. This is going to spawn swirls under every single player. Once this goes off, they will attempt to reload that cast. Try to stop this with stuns, CCs, grips, displacements, and you'll never have to really deal with him as long as you're keeping an eye out for it. A lot of people like to try to skip this Blood Warper. Blood Warpers are probably the scariest trash mob in this first section of the dungeon. So if you can avoid it, great. If not, I'm going to put it in the route because the only way you can realistically skip it is with things like Ring of Peace, Imprison, and Mind Soothe, and Sap. So if you don't have access to those classes, skipping this is difficult. If you happen to pull this, or not pull this, there are some trash pulls you can make up later. After that, you're going to head up these stairs here to face off against this pull. This is just efficient count, in my opinion. You could always go up the right-hand stairs and handle like these inspectors, but again, this is just the route that I like to use. Next, it is time to pull boss. I'm not going to do any kind of boss explanation in this video. I've already made a video for that going over all the bosses in this dungeon, so if you've missed that or you want to go watch that again as a refresher, I'm going to link it on screen here as well as down below. So once you kill boss, you do need to destroy this stockpiled weapon. I recommend pulling the Blood Warper, and if you're feeling a little zesty, pull in these Dark Fuse Soldiers as well. Your DPS will thank you. Once that stockpiled weapon is destroyed, it is now time to pull these snipers as well as these loader bots. These snipers are actually not snipers anymore, if I'm not mistaken. So this pull is fairly safe. And then last but not least, you have 1 final Blood Warper pack. Now, this is the scariest one because it has not only 2 soldiers in it, but it also has, I believe it actually has 1 of these snipers, which can cause a lot of issues, and it has a Demolitionist. The Demolitionist in this pull is going to force you to move often. The snipers are going to do additional damage on top of the Blood Warper's damage, which can be very lethal, so use defensives aggressively on this pack. Once you kill this pack, you'll be able to destroy the stockpiled weapons that has been moved from this pack up here. And then there's a nice paraglider that you are going to click on, and you're going to fly all the way across. There's a targeted thing on the ground, like a big target, landing target on the ground. Land on that, and then jump up into this next pull here. Some groups actually skip this pack, but I'm going to have it in the routes. Once you kill this pack, you're going to head down a little bit to the south to handle the next pack of contractors and surveyors. Again, contractors don't really do anything. They're just fodder. Then you're going to be heading up the stairs to handle the shreddinators. During this pull, feel free to pull in a surveyor if you'd like. You don't necessarily have to. This adds double shreddinators a lot for a lot of groups to deal with, and it can be overwhelming at times. So do be careful if you end up pulling this. And then you'll be pulling this last pack. So at this point, we are at roughly 60% count. I don't remember if it changes because of some of the trash changes earlier on, but roughly 60% is where you want to be. Once you kill the second boss, you're going to be heading down to clear Swamp Face's room. This is going to have you pulling all of the divers. Divers are fairly chill. They do harpoon, which can do a little bit of bleed damage to a target, but all they really do is plant C4 bombs, which are completely avoidable. So just make sure you're not standing in it. Next, we have the Disturbed Kelp. These are linked, but they're also not linked. So you can split this pull up if you really want to, but most groups just pull them all together. Just make sure you're using kicks and a ton of AoE CC on their Jettison Kelp, as well as their Regenerative Mists cast, or whatever it's called. Holy cow, I just butchered that. But it's 7 in the morning, so I'm not gonna try to correct it. And then next we have Swamp Face. So going downstairs, you want roughly 76% count. This is a little loose. You can have less, you can have more, depending on what you'd like to do. But for this, we're going to kind of hold W. So downstairs, this is very linear. There's a couple of things you could do to optimize how you're going to pull some of these mobs. But for the most part, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with Bubbles. He is a very nasty mini-boss. Some groups tank him on the bridge. Some groups will pull him back to this area. I don't like pulling him back because people forget that these architects exist, and then pull this, and then it'll quickly lead to a group wipe. So pull Bubbles, keep him on the bridge. Tanks with a defensive can soak Bubbles on the ground if you'd like. Just dodge frontal, healers pump through the damage. The next pull you're going to do are these contractors, inspectors, and there's one electrician. This needs a kick, but the rest of the stuff is kind of just fodder. Inspectors teleport behind random targets and cast a frontal. You can either dodge this, or if you coordinate some type of AoE CC or stuns, or even single target stuns, you can lock down their casts pretty easily. So I recommend doing this. Just be careful of this jump starter. He is very lethal. He has spectral sight. Be very careful of this mob. Next, we have double electrician, and we're going to chain this into double inspector. Try to focus down the electricians. They do a lot of lethal damage through their casts and their stuns, so be very careful of this pull. The next two pulls are probably the hardest in the dungeon. You're going to want to focus down one electrician. Some groups even crowd control one of these electricians out until they're feeling comfortable. The jump starters do a ton of group damage and spawn swirls and do a nasty tank buster. So tanks, be very respectful of this. And then last but not least, we have the double jump starters at the very end. Same thing here. Pick one, ping one, focus it down, and hopefully you can live through the damage. Then you're going to be finishing up with the Giesel Gigazap, and you will be all set. So that's the route. Pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy. Take one pull at a time if you really need to. Try to, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. There is, what's nice about this dungeon, and what you're going to see over the course of the season, is groups are going to adapt routes based around their composition. There's a lot of really cool skips you can do in here. There's a lot of really big pulls you can do onto bosses. This dungeon is going to be very fun for a lot of tanks, experienced tanks, I should say. For novice tanks, this dungeon might be a little bit daunting because it's so open, but if you stick to a route like this, it should feel pretty linear and pretty tame, and your DPS won't complain too much because most of the pulls are going to be 6+ targets. Anyways, I hope that helps. Boss guides will be down below, and the route will also be down below, and there's a ton of information also in my Discord. I hope you guys have a good time in Season 2. Best of luck, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.